There comes a moment in the life of every truly powerful person when a choice is unavoidable. Either rise again from absolute ruin or remain broken forever. You may have been crushed, humiliated, betrayed, stripped of every advantage. Yet this is the birthplace of strategy. Not when you're secure, not when you're ahead. True strategy begins in the dirt, when you've been shattered and no comforting illusions remain. Machiavelli never hid this truth. He wrote, "For rulers in peril, for men banished from their homelands, for leaders staring at execution, for kings on the edge of losing their crowns." His message was ruthless in its clarity. If you are weak, you are prey. If you are ruled by emotion, you are bait. And if you rebuild carelessly, you will resurrect the very prison that broke you, instead of forging new power. So, how does a ruthless strategist rebuild? First, they strip away their former identity as a snake discards old skin. They do not grieve for who they once were. That version, the one that was betrayed, ignored, underestimated, was not designed to win in the world as it truly is. It was designed for acceptance, for approval. And Machiavelli would warn you, the instant you cling to that image, you have already handed victory to your enemies. A strategist accepts, without sentiment, that their old self must be destroyed. Not out of sorrow, not out of shame, but by deliberate design. You are not recovering, you are reconstructing. And the reconstruction begins with the most brutal act, cold detachment. You cut the noise, you shut down outside voices, you stop asking what anyone thinks. You withdraw, not to hide, but to watch. This is not healing, it is war planning. The strategist sits in the quiet and records with precision the exact ways in which they were broken, not emotionally, but logically. Which weakness was exploited? What signals encouraged disrespect? Where did you grant too much tolerance? These are not diary confessions, they are intelligence briefings. Because if you rebuild without identifying the fractures, you will collapse again. Once detachment is secured, the next task is to chart your power zones. Every person holds leverage, but most never notice it. Why? Because they mistake power for approval. A strategist understands that power is defined by control. What can you refuse? Who can you do without? What can you walk away from that others are trapped by? Those are your power zones. A strategist builds their life around them, never away from them. If persuasion is your strength, you do not waste time trying to charm everyone. If you are analytical, you abandon the chase for charisma. Power is not crafted by becoming well-rounded. It is sharpened by becoming a weapon.
Then comes resource alignment. The ruthless waste nothing. They know precisely what drains them and cut it off instantly. No delays, no gentle exits, immediate removal. This includes people, routines, addictions, patterns. If it weakens you, even if it brings pleasure, it is discarded. A strategist guards their energy as if it were a sovereign territory. No leaks, no parasites, no chaos. This is where the masses fail. They attempt to rebuild while keeping the poison close. The ruthless do not. Here is where the shift grows colder. A ruthless strategist shapes a new image with intention, not to gain applause, but to project intimidation, not through noise, but through presence. After your fall, you do not return with explanations. You return with stillness, sharpness, and composure. You walk into a room as though you own it. You do not justify your change. You live it. Machiavelli taught that rulers must appear virtuous, but only when it serves them. Your new image exists to make others hesitate before crossing you again. Now on to information control, another merciless habit, withholding clarity. The weak overshare when trying to rebuild, broadcasting every move in search of reassurance. A strategist knows ambiguity is strength. They move in silence, allowing others to wonder. They do not reveal plans until they are already in motion and winning. This does not mean isolation, it means selective revelation. Never expose your full strategy. Let them see only fragments, enough to unsettle. Machiavelli's lesson: appear harmless until it is too late. While rebuilding, you also construct a psychological firewall. You disengage from those who drain, delay, or derail you. This is not about fighting, it is about quiet deletion. You no longer take the bait. You stop defending yourself. You allow talk, but you stop caring. Why? Because every second spent explaining is stolen from execution. That is the cold arithmetic, and the strategist is always doing the math. Finally, the ruthless rebuilder selects one weapon and hones it to deadly sharpness: influence, precision, charisma, logic. Every historic power figure became legendary for mastering a single skill with relentless focus. You do not need to excel at everything. You need to be unforgettable for one thing. This is how you rebuild as a strategist. You stop recovering like a victim and start moving like a ruler in exile. You rebuild not to endure, but to ensure you are never broken in the same way twice. When a strategist rebuilds, they do not ask what feels right, they ask what works. This is the line dividing ordinary self-improvement from Machiavellian reconstruction. Most rebuild for comfort. The strategist rebuilds for victory. They care nothing for authenticity if it costs them ground. If a mask grants them reach, they wear the mask. If silence gives them more control than speech, they remain silent. If solitude offers more leverage than companionship, they vanish. The truth is this: real power is rarely acknowledged by the crowd. It is feared in silence, respected in shadows.
Once you begin the teardown, stripping weaknesses, rejecting approval, abandoning noise, the second phase begins: positional reconstruction. You do not simply rebuild into someone stronger, you rebuild into someone immovable. This starts with mastering your value vector, one undeniable thread of utility that no environment can dismiss. For some, it's insight; for others, precision; for a rare few, mere presence. But it must be something the world needs, not merely something it enjoys. Machiavelli would phrase it this way: a prince must learn not to be good and to apply that knowledge when survival demands it. In practice, you must be ready to bend morals when survival is at stake. Most rebuilders obsess over appearing fair. The strategist obsesses over being unshakable. To achieve that, one rule is absolute: build leverage before loyalty. In your new life, you must create assets that command respect, not feelings that beg for it. That means building something others must access, owning knowledge others crave but cannot obtain, or becoming so specialized they hesitate to replace you. Loyalty shifts with time, emotion, and opportunity. But leverage makes even the disloyal obey. Next comes one of the most dangerous elements of a strategic rebuild: information filtration. You no longer consume like the masses. They scroll for comfort. You extract only what can be weaponized. Every book, conversation, mentor, or clip must pass one test: will this increase my leverage or sharpen my edge? Your mind becomes a guarded gate. Nothing enters without purpose. You also adopt controlled coldness, outwardly polite, inwardly saying, "I see all and I owe you nothing." This is not cruelty.
It is distance by intent, because during your rebuild, you will attract scavengers, people who sense vulnerability and offer comfort to keep you compliant. The strategist accepts the kindness, then walks away. Not all comfort is clean. Some comfort is a leash. So how do you forge this mental steel? Through rehearsed resilience. You run through possible betrayals before they strike. You ask, what will I do when this ally turns on me? If I fail publicly again? If I'm mocked, questioned, dismissed? This is not paranoia, it is preparation. Expecting friction makes you unshakable. Anticipating attack makes you steady. And when the storm arrives, you stand unflinching because you've already endured it in your mind 1,000 times. Then, layer by layer, you embed ritualized command into your days. Wake at the same hour, not for health, but for ownership. Speak more slowly, not for calm, but for dominance. Hold silence in conversation, not for mystery, but for control. These are not mere habits. They are coded signals to your subconscious. I am in command. At this stage, you are no longer reacting to life. You are sculpting it. Even your entrance into a room changes. No hurried steps, no nervous energy. Every motion says, I am the threat you failed to prepare for. This is not arrogance. It is cold precision. Machiavelli would say, one must be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves. The strategist becomes both, cunning in perception, ruthless in execution.
And as you pass through this transformation, you take on the most devastating weapon of all, vengeance through evolution. You do not argue. You do not plead, you do not explain, you disappear, only to re-emerge later as something unrecognizable, unreachable, undeniably ascended. That is the most cutting blow. Not that you barked back, but that you rose so far above the conflict that your enemy cannot even graze you, no matter how desperately they reach. You don't rebuild to humiliate them. You rebuild so thoroughly they no longer matter. Every strategist etches one law into their mind during this phase of reconstruction. Never interrupt an enemy while they are busy underestimating you. This is where ordinary people sabotage themselves. They want to be noticed while still in the process. They crave credit mid-construction. But Machiavellian rebuilding embraces invisibility. Not from shame, but because steel sharpens best when no one sees the blade forming. This is the core of Part 3. Not the internal campaign, not the silence, but the return. The manner in which a strategist steps back onto the battlefield after rebuilding. And it begins not with noise, but with presence. You don't reintroduce yourself with speeches. You reintroduce yourself by altering the air in the room. When you enter, people should sense it before they understand it. Something feels altered. You smile less. You offer no explanations. Your calm is not born from peace, but from calculation. That composure unsettles far more than arrogance ever could. This is deliberate, because the moment you declare, I've changed, you invite challenges. But when you embody change without words, you force others to adjust or fall behind. Next comes the illusion of openness. The strategist does not vanish completely. That would spark suspicion. Instead, they shape the story, carefully choosing what to reveal so it strengthens their image. You speak sparingly, but every word carries weight. You share victories, never your methods. You allow glimpses of results, never the machinery behind them. This is what Machiavelli meant by appearing virtuous without being trapped by virtue. You give enough to inspire, never enough to disarm. Now you draw the new map of your relationships. In the shadows of your rebuild, you noted who helped, who vanished, who mocked, and who pretended. A strategist does not forget. Yet they also avoid amateur revenge. No insults, no public retaliation, only repositioning. The loyal are brought closer, but never so close they can harm you. The disloyal are not punished. They are erased quietly, without ceremony. And toward the powerful, you do not flatter, you intrigue. This is essential. You stop chasing power and instead become a gravitational force for it. Influence, opportunity, and allies come to you, not through pursuit, but because you have become a center of motion. Your silence sparks conversation. Your certainty makes others question themselves. Your focus becomes a contagion. This is how kings move, not to impress, but to be observed. But observation alone is not enough. Now that you have rebuilt, you must ensure this foundation cannot be broken in the same way again. This requires crafting your next self before the world demands it. The strategist does not build for the present, they construct for the battlefield of the future. They scan constantly. Which skills are gaining value? Which vulnerabilities are becoming common prey? Where is attention shifting, and how can I redirect it? The powerful don't just react quickly, they predict quietly. While the masses ride today's wave, you are building tomorrow's vessel, and you build it in silence. This is where it gets personal. Every strategist nurtures what can be called a quiet obsession. It is not a pastime. It is not a mere interest. It is a concealed weapon, refined over years or decades. It could be deep psychological insight, a rare technical mastery, or the uncanny ability to shape social energy. Whatever it is, you cultivate it privately, because one day it will be the exact asset required in a moment of crisis. And when that moment comes, you don't arrive ready, you arrive inevitable. This obsession creates an unfair advantage, and the strategist thrives on such advantages. Now to emotional armor. You will be tested again. The world has no reverence for the fact that you rebuilt. The moment your presence grows, certain people will try to drag you back to the emotional level where they can compete. That is why your next defense is your response system, not reactive emotionally, not defensive intellectually, but calibrated strategically. If insulted, you give a faint smile, say nothing, and redirect your escalation elsewhere. If your achievements are questioned, you feign misunderstanding, then counter with a sharper inquiry. If provoked, you reflect their words back like a mirror until discomfort blooms on their side. You are no longer defending dignity. You are reshaping perception. This is how the ruthless become untouchable, not by avoiding conflict, but by converting it into a stage for controlled dominance. People won't remember your words. They'll remember the helplessness they felt in your presence. This is your new form. Not louder, not softer, engineered. You are no longer seeking to prove you have changed. You have made change your baseline. The strategist understands that rebuilding is never a single event. It is a permanent condition. They do not repair themselves once and declare the work finished. They operate under continuous refinement. Every room is a trial. Every setback is a signal. Every encounter is a chance to recalibrate. Machiavellian rebirth is not about becoming someone else. It is about unearthing the version buried beneath the need for approval, the pressure to conform, and the fear of being feared. Once that version surfaces, everything alters. Not because you demand the world change, but because you leave it no choice but to see you differently. Precision is key now. There are 5 uncompromising principles you must carry forward, or risk sliding back into the broken version you buried. First, never again display your pain publicly.
Your suffering is not a showpiece. It is not a bargaining chip. It is intelligence for you alone. The powerful don't parade wounds for pity. They distill them into lessons, transform them into tools, and wield the insight, not the injury. This is not emotional numbness. On the contrary, it's heightened intelligence, but reserved, filtered, and selective. The strategist knows, the moment you show where you bleed, someone will measure where to strike. Second, your circle contracts, but becomes lethal. You are no longer accessible to those who drain you under the guise of loyalty. You are no longer patient with those who hide envy inside concern. Your circle now consists of 3 archetypes: the sharp, those who challenge your thinking; the silent, those who respect your evolution without commentary; and the dangerous, those who move with precision and ruthlessness like you. All others are background noise. If they aren't expanding you, they're confining you. Third, every emotion is observed before it is allowed to be felt. The former you reacted first, rationalized later, and lost because of it. Now the sequence is reversed. You witness the emotion, question its value, then decide whether to show it. Anger arrives. You ask, will releasing this here serve me? Sadness rises. Will it display weakness or inspire loyalty? Joy appears. Will sharing this create a future vulnerability? This is not fakeness. This is sovereignty. You no longer belong to your emotions. You command them. Fourth, you speak not to connect, but to shift dynamics. This is not coldness. It is function. You do not vent. You do not overshare. You do not soothe unless it forges rapport. You do not praise unless it plants leverage. Your words are a scalpel, not a blanket. They shape environments, reposition players, and seed ideas. And when silence is sharper, you wield it with intent.
Fifth, you never build the same self twice. This is the last law, because here lies the trap of transformation. The ego craves a story. Once you rebuild, it seeks to freeze, declaring, "This is the new me." That's when people become conquerable again. The strategist does not freeze. They evolve before the next strike lands. They don't wait for collapse before adapting. They detect trends before they appear. They advance their skills before they age. They shift tone, territory, and image, just quickly enough to stay unreachable, just slowly enough to stay familiar. They are never caught off guard, because betrayal is expected, not from paranoia, but from principle. They know betrayal, like winter, always returns, and only the naive are surprised when it does. So here we arrive at you. You are no longer the version that begged to be understood, that chased apologies, that forgave without recalculating, that bared pain to those who weaponized it, that tried to mend what needed to be ended. That version is gone. In its place stands someone sharper, quieter, heavier. Someone who does not simply walk through the world, but tilts it slightly every time they enter. Not through noise, but because they rebuilt with strategy, with silence, and with psychological precision. That is the Machiavellian way. And if you've executed this correctly, no one will realize it is you until it's far too late.